Ever find yourself wondering why traditional project management, like that waterfall method, seems to hit a wall, pun intended? Like you plan everything out perfectly, but then, bam, reality throws a curveball.
Yeah.
So today, we're ditching the surface level and diving deep into the why. We're talking about the fundamental principles behind Agile. And get this, we're about to explore how physics, biology, and even AI play a role. Our guide for this deep dive, Jeff Sutherland's book, First Principles in Scrum, Implementing Scrum and Agile Practices. More specifically, Chapter 1, First Principles in Scrum, Teams that finish early, accelerate faster.
Oh, I love that book.
It's a goldmine, right? We'll be connecting Agile to those first principles and even dissecting this fascinating case study about AT&T and Bell South. This company, on paper, did everything right, but still faced some major hurdles. So imagine, instead of Agile being this vague set of practices, it's more like, let's say, the Agile Technology Stack. Kind of like the Synapse framework, but for understanding the layers of Agile.
I like that.
Each layer, right, it builds on the one below it, and boom, you've got this robust and adaptable approach to project management.
That's a great comparison. The Agile Technology Stack really helps us visualize how these different principles and practices all connect. And just like with the Synapse framework, understanding these layers can be a game changer in how you approach Agile problems and solutions.
Okay, so let's start with the foundation. What's the bedrock of this Agile Technology Stack?
Well, this might surprise you, but it all begins with physics. Specifically, Wolfram's principles of computational irreducibility and computational equivalence.
Wolfram, as in Wolfram Alpha and Mathematica Wolfram. Okay, you got my attention. Break this down for me. Physics and Agile. How do those two connect?
Okay, so picture this. Wolfram's principle of computational irreducibility. What it basically means is that you can't always predict the outcome of something complex just by trying to skip ahead.
Okay.
It's like, imagine trying to pinpoint the exact position of a double pendulum at a specific moment in the future. You can't just calculate that based on where it started, right? You have to let the system unfold.
So are you saying that forcing a project to follow this rigid plan is kind of like defying the laws of physics?
Exactly. Traditional waterfall methodologies, they often try to map out the entire project up front. They assume everything will go exactly according to plan. But just like that double pendulum, projects, they're full of surprises. You can't just fast forward to the end. You have to embrace the unpredictable. And that's where Agile comes in. Agile, it allows for adaptation, adjustments along the way, acknowledging that the initial plan, well, it might need to change.
That makes a lot of sense. Now, what about computational equivalence? How does that fit into Agile?
Right. So Wolfram's principle of computational equivalence, it suggests that even systems that seem super complex can actually come from pretty simple rules. And Agile reflects that. You have these straightforward iterative processes like Scrum, and from that you can get incredibly sophisticated, valuable outcomes.
It's like those intricate patterns you see in nature fractals.
Yeah.
Simple rules, but repeated over and over lead to these incredibly complex and beautiful designs.
Exactly. That's the beauty of Agile. It provides a framework to manage complexity, but keeps that flexibility and adaptation along the way.
Okay, so we've got physics as our base. What's the next layer in our Agile technology stack?
Next up is biology. Now, one of the big misconceptions about Agile is that it's all about working harder, but it's really about working smarter. Agile aligns with our natural rhythms, emphasizes a sustainable pace, manages energy levels, minimizes stress.
I am all about sustainable case. I've definitely experienced burnout, and it's not pretty. How does this actually play out in real-world Agile settings?
Let's look at the early days of extreme programming, or XP, one of the forerunners of Agile. These teams were achieving incredible speed, working up to 42 times faster than traditional teams.
Wait, 42 times? Seriously, what was their secret? Were they just working insane hours?
That's the thing. It wasn't about brutal hours. It was about understanding their natural energy rhythms and optimizing their workflow around those rhythms. They used things like pair programming, where two programmers work together on the same code, and test-driven development, where they write tests before writing the code. And these practices, they actually promote focus, reduce errors, and ultimately lead to a more sustainable and enjoyable work style.
So they were working with their natural rhythms, not against them. That's fascinating. We've covered physics and biology. What's next in the Agile technology stack?
Next up is neuroscience. We're talking about how our brains learn, adapt, and process information. Certain Agile practices can actually leverage or hinder these natural processes, which of course impacts a team's effectiveness.
So you're telling me that even those quick daily stand-ups and retrospectives, have a basis in neuroscience.
Absolutely. Those daily stand-ups, they're not just for status updates, they actually tap into how our brains solidify memories. Through spaced repetition, which happens naturally with those daily stand-ups, we reinforce new information and make it stick.
That's so cool.
Mhm.
I've always found that those daily check-ins keep me on track, but never really considered the brain science behind it. Like building muscle memory, but for project management.
Exactly. And retrospectives, they're essentially prime learning opportunities for our brains. Taking the time to reflect, analyze what went well, what didn't, and identify areas for improvement. That aligns perfectly with how our brains naturally learn and adapt.
It's incredible how we often underestimate the power of these seemingly simple agile practices. Oh, it's just a quick meeting, we think. But there's some serious brain science happening there, influencing how we learn and improve as a team.
And the consequence of ignoring this layer, well, missed learning opportunities, poorer decisions, and in the end, a less effective and honestly, a less happy team. It's like trying to drive a car without understanding how the engine works. You might get to your destination, but you could be missing out on some crucial maintenance along the way.
Okay, so we've built up to physics, biology, and now neuroscience. What other layers are there in this Agile technology stack?
So the next layer up in the Agile Technology Stack, this is where all those neuroscientific principles we were just talking about, they start to play out in the dynamics of an actual team. We call this the complex adaptive systems layer.
Okay, so we're moving from the individual brain to like the collective brain of a team.
You got it. This layer is all about how teams interact, how they self-organize, and how they adapt to change. Kind of like a living organism adapting to its environment.
I see.
Think about like flocks of birds or schools of fish. They move in these crazy, intricate patterns, right? But they're not following some rigid, predetermined plan. They're responding to each other, to their surroundings, all in real time.
So a successful Agile team, they're less like a marching band, rigidly following a set formation, and more like a jazz ensemble, adapting and improvising as they go.
Now you're getting it. And just like a jazz ensemble needs the right structure, the right communication to really groove, Agile teams rely on frameworks. Like Scrum, that's our next layer. Scrum, it provides that structure, those roles, those ceremonies that let teams really embrace this adaptable, responsive way of working.
So Scrum gives you the guidelines, but it's up to the team to find their own rhythm, their style within that framework. It's like different jazz bands can interpret the same song in completely different ways, but it's still jazz.
Precisely. And just as jazz can scale, right, you can have a small combo or a big band, well, Agile can scale to larger organizations too. And that's where frameworks like Scrum at scale come in. That's our next layer. It's a way to coordinate, to align multiple Scrum teams, making sure everyone's moving in the same direction while still keeping that adaptability, that flexibility.
So it's about striking that balance. Structure, yes, but also freedom, making sure teams have the guidance they need, but also empowering them to adapt, to innovate.
Exactly. You've got it. And all of these layers, from those fundamental laws of physics to the complex dynamics of teams, they're all tied together by the top layer of our Agile technology stack. Agile values and principles.
Right. The guiding principles, the foundation of it all. Remind us what those are again.
Think back to the Agile Manifesto. Those values, individuals and interactions over processes and tools, working software over comprehensive documentation, customer collaboration over contract negotiation, and responding to change over following a plan.
It's not just about going through the motions, just checking boxes. It's about embracing a mindset, collaboration, flexibility, that constant drive to improve.
Exactly. And those values, they're crucial. They're the guiding philosophy for everything else we've talked about. They remind us that Agile, at its core, it's a human-centered way to work, recognizing that the best results come from empowered teams that can learn and adapt together.
This makes me think about all the advancements in technology we're seeing, especially artificial intelligence. Where does AI fit into this whole Agile technology stack?
Now, that's a great question. The thing to remember here is that AI, it's not about replacing Agile, it's about amplifying it. We call this the extreme Agile layer.
Okay, I like that. So instead of AI taking over our Agile projects, it's more like AI becoming another instrument in that jazz ensemble, enhancing the music, not replacing the musician.
Exactly. Imagine AI tools that can analyze mountains of data in real time, giving teams those instant insights into project progress, potential bottlenecks, even customer feedback. What if AI could automate all those repetitive tasks that bog teams down, freeing them up to focus on the more creative, strategic work?
That sounds amazing. It's like giving each team member a superpowered assistant. But is this some far-off thing? Or is this happening now?
It's happening now. We're seeing AI tools like Microsoft Copilot becoming more integrated into the Agile process as we speak. Some experts believe that by 2030, we could see performance improvements of 30 to 100 times in Agile teams thanks to AI.
Wow, those are some bold predictions. But before we get too lost in the AI hype, I want to bring this back down to earth with some real-world examples.
Absolutely. Let's look at two contrasting case studies. These really highlight both the power of the Agile technology stack and what happens when you ignore it.
Okay, love it. Let's start with a common pitfall, something I'm sure a lot of people have experienced: dysfunctional Scrum teams.
Yeah.
What causes these teams to struggle, even when they're in NERS, following the Scrum framework?
One of the biggest culprits is a lack of understanding of those deeper layers we've been discussing. Take, for instance, this team I worked with recently. They were really struggling even though they had all the Scrum ceremonies in place, daily stand-ups, sprints, the whole 9 yards. But there was this underlying issue. They had an absent product owner.
Ah, the product owner.
Yeah.
The champion of the customer, the one making sure the team is building the right thing.
Exactly. And in this case, the product owner was constantly unavailable, delegating their responsibilities to someone from management who honestly lacked that crucial connection to the stakeholders, to the market.
So they were going through the motions of Scrum, but they were missing a key ingredient.
Exactly. This situation, it highlights the importance of that Agile values and principles layer. Remember, customer collaboration over contract negotiation. Well, this team, they were missing that vital link with their customers, and it led to confusion, frustration, and ultimately a product that just didn't hit the mark.
And I'm guessing this disconnect had a ripple effect throughout that entire Agile technology stack.
Spot on. Because they didn't have a clear understanding of what the customer actually needed, they were constantly hit with changes, new directions, often after they'd already started working on something.
Ah, scope creep rearing its ugly head. That can throw a team completely off balance and lead to burnout fast. Which takes us back to that biology layer, right?
Absolutely. This constant state of flux, the uncertainty, it takes its toll. Their brains were experiencing what we call excessive Bayesian surprise. Basically, they were bombarded with unexpected information all the time, making it tough to focus, to learn, to make good decisions.
So it's like trying to put together a puzzle, but the pieces keep changing shape. No wonder they were struggling.
Exactly. And because they were so busy reacting to the latest Freyer drill, they didn't have the time or the energy to step back, reflect on what was working, what wasn't. Their learning loop was broken.
That's a great way to put it. Going through the motions of Scrum, but missing the underlying principles that make it actually work.
Exactly. And this is why that deep understanding of the Agile technology stack, it's so valuable. It lets you diagnose the root cause of a team's dysfunction, not just the symptoms. In this case, the solution involved coaching the team and the product owner on the importance of their roles, setting up clear communication channels, and creating a more sustainable pace that actually allowed for learning and adaptation.
It's like a doctor treating the whole patient, not just the snivels. Now, you mentioned another case study. This one illustrates the downsides of those traditional project management methodologies like Waterfall. You mentioned AT&T earlier, known for hitting their deadlines, staying on budget, but something wasn't quite right there. Tell me more about that. AT&T, huh? Known for hitting those deadlines, staying on budget? I mean, that's usually a good thing, right? What was the problem?
So yeah, on the surface, it seemed like they were nailing it. Projects delivered right on schedule, within budget, but, and this is a big but, often the customers, they didn't even want what they got.
Really?
Yeah.
So what happened?
Well, it turned out that AT&T being so strict with that waterfall methodology, that was a big part of the issue.
So they were so focused on sticking to the plan that they kind of forgot about the people they were building it for.
Exactly. And that's where waterfall and the whole Agile technology stack, they just clash. Waterfall, it's like, get all the requirements up front, plan every little thing out, and then execute in this straight line, like following a recipe, you know?
But projects, especially in the tech world, it's constantly changing. It's less like a recipe, more like navigating a new city with just a paper map. You might eventually get where you're going, but you miss all the cool stuff, the detours, the shortcuts along the way.
Perfect analogy. And by the time AT&T actually got feedback from customers, it was often way too late to change anything major without, blowing the budget or missing deadlines.
So they were trapped by their own plan, unable to adapt to what their customers actually wanted as things changed.
Exactly. And this is where that Agile technology stack shines, Remember Wolfram's principle of computational irreducibility? Well, Waterfall kind of ignores that whole concept by assuming you can predict perfectly how this complex project will turn out. Agile, on the other hand, it recognizes that you can't see every single twist and turn. So instead of being married to this rigid plan, Agile teams, they focus on iterative development, constant feedback, being able to adapt on the fly.
So it's not about being married to the script. It's about like riffing, improvising as you go based on what you learn. Like those early extreme programming teams we talked about, responding to challenges as they came up, constantly tweaking the process.
Exactly. Plus, if we're thinking about neuroscience, those long feedback loops you get with Waterfall, they go against how our brains are wired. Our brains crave feedback. That's how we make sense of things, how we learn, how we get better. Agile, with its short cycles and those retrospectives, it just aligns with that natural learning process so much better.
So it's not just about being flexible with our processes. It's about aligning the way we work with how our brains actually learn and adapt best.
Exactly. And if you look at it from that complex adaptive systems perspective, well, Waterfall, with its rigid structure, it actually holds teams back from self-organizing, from responding to those curveballs that inevitably come up. Agile, though, it empowers teams to adapt their processes, get creative with their solutions, really tap into the collective intelligence of the group.
So AT&T, their downfall, it was essentially ignoring those fundamental principles we see in physics, neuroscience, and complex systems, the very principles that make Agile so effective.
Yes. And what happened? Well, they might have been known for delivering on time and on budget, but those projects, often, they missed the mark. They weren't delivering what customers actually needed. In fact, some reports say 100% of AT&T's Waterfall projects, they failed to meet those real customer needs, even when they followed that initial plan perfectly. And unfortunately, this misalignment, it played a part in Bell South's bankruptcy just a year after all this came to light.
That's a cautionary tale right there for anyone stuck in those old ways of doing things. This world, it's all about change now, and if you can't adapt, well...
You get left behind.
Exactly. And it's not just about surviving, it's about thriving. As we're entering this new era of AI, with the potential to change, well, everything, how do you see Agile changing and adapting? How can these adaptable frameworks make the most of AI's power?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? We're already seeing how AI can boost those core Agile strengths, automating tasks, providing those real-time data insights, making feedback loops lightning fast. But we're just scratching the surface here. The really exciting stuff, it'll happen when AI becomes part of the Agile Technology Stack itself.
So it's not enough to just use AI tools in Agile. We're talking about AI changing how we even think about and do Agile.
Exactly. Just imagine AI that can analyze how teams communicate, pinpointing potential issues or areas where they could collaborate better. What about AI tools that actually personalize a team's workflow, tailoring it to their individual work styles, their preferences, maximizing the productivity, but also their well-being at the same time?
So we're not just talking about AI helping us work faster. We're talking about working smarter, more creatively, more collaboratively. But of course, big changes come with big questions, right? If AI can really boost performance by 30 to 100 times, what does that even mean for the future of work? Which industries will feel it the most? What new skills, what new mindsets will people need to thrive in this AI-augmented world? Big questions, no easy answers. But that's something we'll keep exploring in our future deep dives. For now, keep this in mind. Agile, it's not just a set of practices, a to-do list. It's bigger than that. It's a philosophy. A way of thinking about work that embraces change, that values collaboration, that puts continuous learning front and center. We've covered a lot of ground today, from the fundamental laws of physics to the cutting edge of AI. But at the end of the day, it's that human element, that spark, our ability to adapt, to learn, to evolve, that truly makes Agile work.
Couldn't have said it better myself.